Today, the Altoona Police Department and Blair County District Attorney's Office is announcing the arrest of Michael Copley for the murder of his wife, Catherine Copley. On or about December 10th of 2015, she was reported missing. An investigation ensued, and in June of 2016, her body was discovered in a garage in the Altoona area. Over the last several years, the Altoona Police Department has dedicated time and resources to investigate this matter. There were several different avenues of investigation, including interviewing multiple witnesses, obtaining forensic information from evidence collected at the body site and other areas, and obtaining information from both the cell phone provider of Mr. Copley and some of the applications that were on his phone that were able to provide us with specific GPS locations for Mr. Copley on or about December 10th, 2015. The charges include criminal homicide, aggravated assault, criminal trespass, recklessly endangering another person, simple assault, abuse of a corpse, and tampering or fabricating physical evidence.
You got all that?
How'd you crack the case?
I was going to ask if you had any questions.
Yeah, well, I don't wait. How'd you crack the case? A cell phone?
This case relies on various pieces of evidence that brought together shows a picture of what happened. And again, like any other case, we can't talk too much about the specific allegations or things of that nature, but I will say that there was some forensic DNA evidence that we're able to get with the assistance of the Pennsylvania State Police Crime Lab. And again, the cell phone data continues to be a resource that in this case not only gave us cell site tower data information, but eventually we were able to use that to get GPS coordinates.
What was the motive?
I don't know. You want to talk about that?
Again, all questions like that we're not really going to be able to comment on because this is a case that has just been filed. There's only certain things we can comment on.
Is there a date set for court now?
No, the magistrate district judge will establish a preliminary hearing. The defendant will have to obtain counsel or get counsel appointed for him. Typically, the first date scheduled for a hearing in a case like this won't be when the hearing actually occurs anyway, so I'm not certain when that will be.
We have to comment on the extensive man-hours put into this matter by the Altoona Police Department. Possibly Lieutenant Pratt here could indicate some estimate of what was involved, but it's astronomical as far as I know.
Well, it obviously went through a series of detectives. Some of those detectives are now retired. And the reason why it went through several detectives was not only the length of time that the case took, but as Attorney Weeks elaborated on some of the technical aspects of the investigation. Most of our detectives have an area of expertise or specialized training in one aspect of the investigation or another, so it was a collaborative effort based upon the majority of our criminal investigations division for the past 3 years.
Can I ask you this question, and I don't want to take anybody off by this, but why did it take so long?
Some of the information recovered in this investigation was recovered as recently as last week. So when we say this has been an ongoing investigation, this is not an investigation where evidence was collected and no one did anything for 3 years. It has been a continual process of evaluating information. Many instances that turned into additional interviews that had to be conducted by the detectives. Some of the people who were interviewed left the jurisdiction and had to be tracked down. Some of the search warrants that we did gave us information that led us to file more search warrants or try to obtain more information. So again, it was a situation where some of the evidence was recovered as late as last week, and what we're faced with in a lot of the technical investigations is the same thing that every other law enforcement agency around the country is faced with. So a lot of these places like Facebook, like Google, to say that they're not pro-law enforcement would be a lie. They, in fact, act anti-law enforcement. They don't want to honor search warrants. They put up roadblocks and obstacles to provide the information even when they get search warrants. When we get sealed search warrants, they want to alert the suspects of the investigation that they're being investigated. Those were obstacles that had to be overcome or dealt with in this case, and we have to continue to deal with in this case. So it has been an ongoing process. Again, as Lieutenant Pratt stated, it's a situation where, you know, there were extensive man hours. Different investigators worked on this case because some of the case involved interviewing people. Other aspects involved technical court orders to obtain geolocation data or cell site tower data. Some of it involved forensic analysis for DNA and things of that nature. So there were a lot of components that had to come together. And again, some of the information was recovered as recently as about a week ago.
An additional follow-up to your question is the fact that when you consider the burden of proof that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has to tender in a criminal trial, that's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In order to make the arrest, you know, you're talking about probable cause. But we worked extensively with the Blair County District Attorney's Office to put together a solid case, not only to have enough to arrest, but you know, with the end game of there being a successful prosecution.
If you had to estimate how many people were involved in the investigation?
Dozens.
Yeah, but that's not good enough. I mean, are we talking 2 dozen? I mean, I know how big the police department is, but maybe if you tell me that you had like 5 or 6 dozen, I'll think, yeah, you had almost the whole police department involved.
Well, that's not the case. It wasn't 5%.
Uh,
You can't
All right,
exaggerate
so-
what you're
so
doing.
that's why we're not gonna just do dozens. How about?
If
you
you're
know?
talking about the combined efforts of both Uniform Patrol and the Criminal Investigations Division, I would, in addition to the numerous evidence techs that process different scenes, and some of the assistance that we got through not only the Pennsylvania State Police, but their crime personnel and their laboratory personnel, I would say you're probably talking about 3 dozen persons that worked with both the evidence, interviews, and whatnot.
Okay, you have to remember too, in an investigation like this, you have the police department who has patrol officers, they have detectives. You have the crime lab who has the personnel who evaluate physical evidence. You have a forensic pathologist and a laboratory that does the autopsy, and they will send out specimens from the autopsy to other laboratories to analyze those specimens. You have the phone company who you're working with, and they have a legal team that you're networking with and trying to get information out of. And then you go from the phone company, and when we serve warrants on the applications themselves, you're talking about, you know, Google and dealing with those people. You're talking about Facebook and dealing with those people. So even though you might have one officer that dealt with that one officer is dealing with, you know, all those various departments and entities. So it becomes involved.
Yeah. Did you say that's why it took so long? Because of all that involvement? Or?
That was certainly one of the factors, but this, you know, if you look at the totality of the circumstances test with her going missing and then eventually recovering her body, I mean, if you look at it, there's nothing from a law enforcement standpoint, at least, about this case that was easy.
Yeah.
You also gotta remember, there's approximately 6 months from her going missing till the body was found.
I remember that.
So, you know, it's not as if nothing was done for 6 months, but still, without finding the body for that period of time, there's only a limited amount of things you can do.
Mhm.
And I would further state that although, you know, Kathy's family was very helpful and very enthusiastic with looking to find her, there were other persons that we contacted in the investigation that were less than cooperative or apathetic to her plight, that weren't exactly enthusiastic about helping the police department find out what happened to her.
Mhm.
And anytime you consider delays, you have to remember that the evidence, while different, is related. So when I said you have people doing interviews, you have people working with forensic scientists, you have people working with technical computer data, you interview people, but then you might go out and get a piece of forensic information, and you might need to go confront someone with your forensic evidence because it may become apparent that they didn't tell you the whole story, or someone's, you know, or something gives you a lead to go talk to somebody else. So all those things, you know, work with each other. So when you complete one task in this investigation, oftentimes 3 more tasks arose from the completion of the first task.
Mhm.
Is this type of case, the complexity, the amount of time it's taken, unprecedented in this area?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think there are, whenever you have a case that, especially a homicide case where you don't recover the body of the decedent for 6 months, that puts you in a difficult position to investigate. Whenever you have a case where you can't make an arrest within 24 or 48 hours, that puts you in a difficult position to investigate. Investigations become markedly harder when you don't have, you know, a suspect on scene, or you're not making that arrest within hours, and things seem to slow down exponentially versus some of the homicides where we prosecute where maybe a shooter's on scene, or you have a video of the shooting occurring and you can act quickly to try to apprehend someone.
Maybe to expand on your question there, some cases, even with a quick arrest, involve a long, torturous type situation and trial. I had one, been several years now, but it lasted 2 weeks. Guy was arrested the day of the homicide. So those things depend on a lot of factors. And I had 50 witnesses in that case. So that creates a lot of obstacles for it.
Can you say why people other than Kathy's family were not helpful? I mean, I don't want you to identify anybody specifically who was a pain, but at the same time, I guess what I'm asking is, there were a lot of people in Altoona who were very interested in seeing her body found, and they were very interested in seeing her killer found. So who wasn't?
Again, to maintain the integrity of the investigation, I guess you'll have to stay tuned for both the preliminary hearing and the eventual trial if the defendant chooses to go that way. And I think it'll become readily apparent who was less than cooperative and who was completely apathetic to her plight.
Did he act on his own, or did he have help? Are you arresting anybody else?
I don't think we can disclose any further investigative details when it comes to that.
Not arresting anybody else today, then?
Well,
Or tomorrow?
what's the old sign, or old statement? There's an ongoing investigation.
Uh-huh.
I have to leave it at that.